All right, on to this story now. The battle to stop a seismic survey off the Wild Coast is heading to the Supreme Court of Appeal. This follows the Makhanda High Court's decision to grant Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe and company Shell, as well as Impact Africa, leave to appeal a previous ruling that blocked the proposed survey. But the Wild Coast communities and environmental organizations are undeterred by the verdict and confident of winning their case. For more on this, we are joined by Wilmien Wicomb from the Legal Resources Centre. Thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. Well, just firstly, obviously the court granted them leave to appeal because they think that they are, prospects of them winning to actually appeal the entire judgment that was made back in September. What makes you so confident that, they won't win in this particular appeal?
Well, actually, the court did not grant leave because it found that there were prospects of success. The court spent most of the judgment yesterday explaining why it did not think that another court would come to a different verdict. However, there's a different reason why one can grant leave to appeal, and that is in the public interest. If a matter is of such significance as this one is, then it is good for a higher court to also interrogate the issues. And even our clients agreed with that and felt that leave should be granted for that reason, for the importance of this matter.
And of course, then it might also give all South Africans a chance to see this court case play out and all the reasons why, such a survey should not happen, especially without the consultation of the communities who live there, which was one of the main arguments of the applicants previously.
Yes, that's correct, and you'll have a full bench of more judges hearing the arguments. And of course, if the Supreme Court finds in our favour, in our clients' favour, which we're confident they will, then the precedent value of the judgment is also much stronger because then it is applicable across the country. And what's really important about the judgment is it's about how decisions about these kinds of activities should be taken, what the minister should take into account. And that is really important not only for this case, but for all cases where this kind of activity that will likely have a massive impact on climate change, where these kinds of activities are authorized by the minister.
What's your view on the fact that the minister and Shell still want to, try and go ahead with the seismic survey, even after what the court had found back in September, even with all the arguments that have been put forward by communities who live there, etc., environmentalists who've explained how this would be a catastrophe even for sea life? What do you make of the fact that they're still continuing with this fight to try and have this seismic survey happen?
So I don't think it's necessarily just about this particular survey on the Wild Coast. So as your viewers might know, our entire coastline has been cut up and dished out to different explorers, or at least people trying to get permits to explore for oil and gas. And so, I think they realize that if this judgment stands, then it does constrain the minister to at least make good decisions, make informed decisions as to whether to grant these kinds of permits. And so I think, that's why it's very important for them to get clarity, same for our clients. And it's not just about the Wild Coast, it's about our entire coastline.
And, I wonder, in terms of the comments that you've seen, or the application that they are taking to the Supreme Court of Appeal, just tell me once more why, the environmentalists and, all the people who are representing those who live in the Wild Coast do believe that, even though it's going to play out for the public interest, why is it that they believe that they definitely will win this case again?
Well, they won in the Makhanda High Court on several grounds of review. So, in order for Shell to win on appeal, the court in Makhanda would have to have been wrong on several different points. And that includes consultation but also a number of other issues like, information that the minister just didn't take into account relating to climate change, etc. And so it's a very, very tall order for the minister and Shell to prove that the Makhanda High Court was wrong on every single count. And I think that's why, we are very, very confident. And the ruling yesterday by the Makhanda Court also, just strengthened our confidence, given that the court agrees with us that there's really no prospect of success, that they will win on appeal.
So the court, if you could just explain to me legally, so the court obviously granted them leave to appeal, not because they agree with their arguments. So I'm assuming that, most of their arguments had to do with why they think the seismic event should still go ahead. But now hearing, the court say that we are granting you leave to appeal, not because we think you have prospects to win, but because we think the public should see how this entire case works out. Isn't that more embarrassing for the minister and Shell, etc., if a court is saying, sure, you can go ahead, but you won't win anyway?
Well, that's a chance that they're taking, and I think they also think that it may well be that the judges of the SCA disagree and do think that there's merit in their arguments. I mean, there's always a chance for that, and so they've got very little to lose if they walk away now, or if they lose in the Supreme Court of Appeal. They're basically in the same position. I think public opinion is what it is. So I think, on balance, there's little for them to lose, and so they're willing to take this chance.
Well, it's going to be quite interesting. I'm assuming that you're waiting to hear from the SCA exactly when the date would be. I think probably, are you hoping it would be in the first quarter at least of the next financial year?
If we're lucky, but it may well be in the second quarter, but we'll see. We're in the hands of the SCA.